Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Open Up the Workforce, where we speak with leaders driving the future of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and beyond. I'm your host, Ava Sadeghi, co-founder and CEO at Symba. Today, we have a very special episode in store for you. We don't have just one leader. We have two leaders who have come together to drive forces to bring incredible work and impact into this space. We have Nichole Barnes-Marshall, the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Pinterest, and Dr. Rachel-Yvonne Talton, the CEO of Synergy International Limited, Inc. Thank you both for joining us today to share your story, work, and impact. Let's get started with a round of intros. We'll kick it off to you, Nichole. Can you share a little bit about your story with us?
Sure. Happy to do it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to also share along with my partner and co-conspirator in DEI, Dr. Rachel. So I currently lead DEI at Pinterest. I've been here now for 2 years. This is my closing out my 23rd year in this work. So a combination of DEI leadership along with corporate social responsibility as well as talent acquisition mixed in there as well. So I like to say often this work is not my occupation, it's my occupation. It is work that is truly aligned with my purpose as well as the recognition of the tangible value that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging bring to organizations, to businesses, to cultures, to individuals, to collectives. And this is the work I believe I was sent here to do. And in those 23 years, this is my 6th industry. I actually started in tech at IBM and have come back full circle now in tech with Pinterest, but I've also served in retail, in insurance, financial services, industrial supply, publishing. So I've had a well-rounded industry background, but certainly a strong depth in DEI, corporate social responsibility, and talent acquisition.
That's amazing. I love the term occupation too. I might steal that or borrow it. Thank you for the word impact.
Let's cite your source. And
I
will. My source, one of my former bosses, previous head of diversity, said that once, and I said, that's mine. I'm taking it. I'm using it forever now. That's it. So
that's amazing. Amazing. Thank you for the impact and work that you've had and are continuing to have. Dr. Rachel, can you share a little bit more about your story and the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And as Nichole mentioned, we really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. And always my co-conspirator, Nichole, and I always look forward to working together to make the world a better place. As Nichole mentioned, I've been in this work I've owned Synergy for 21 years now. I'm only 28, so no math is allowed on this podcast. Just kidding. I am a very proud 57 and I look fabulous. But this is our 21st year in business. We're very excited to share that at Synergy International, we do leadership development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work and consulting. We are executive coaches for several hundred people. We have served as executive coaches as well as marketing research. And so that's the work that we do. Nichole called this her occupation, which I love. I call this work my God job. I am a recovered banker and was in banking, headed toward the C-suite, headed toward the chief marketing, and I'll share that story with you as well, chief marketing officer in the financial services industry. I loved it, continued to be promoted and take on additional responsibilities in banking, and had a tragedy in my life and actually decided that as much as I loved banking, I wanted to do something more meaningful and more impactful with my life. And as Nichole mentioned, this is definitely the work that God put me here to do. Interestingly enough, as I was a banker bringing in thousands of customers, business customers on the commercial side to the bank, our customers were walking out the back door, right? So we were promising them that they would have wonderful relationships and that they'd be able to grow their business and that they'd be able to have these sort of wonderful banking outcomes. And what was happening is that what we were promising them wasn't happening. And so we'd bring these thousands of customers and then they'd leave. And so I found that I was spending half of my time going around the bank doing training and development. I didn't even know what it was called. I just knew that we said we were going to do this. We have to actually do it. And so I just started to be known as this person, this brand ambassador for the truth. And so when I decided to start Synergy, I went to Case Western Reserve University, and I already had my MBA in finance. I still can't count, but that's a different podcast. Even though I graduated at the top of the class, I went to Case Western Reserve, and Nichole, I walked in and I said, I want to get a PhD in how to build a beloved company. And they were like, okay, tell me more. I said, you know, I have this experience, 10 years of experience of how does a company actually do what they say they're going to do? How do they actually build this feeling of trust? And again, I didn't even know that was what I was going to end up studying. I thought I was going to study love. And what I found after many years of research is that you can't create love, but you can create trust. And so my PhD ended up being a study in trust and value, belonging, and psychological safety, right? And how those literally drive revenues for organizations when you do what you say you're going to do for your customers and for your employees and for your stakeholders. So that was why I called my company Synergy. And for 21 years, we've been doing the work of really helping companies do what they say they're going to do, build that integrity from the inside out. And again, this is my God job. And that means a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of responsibility, but I love it. And I thank God every day that I get to do this work.
That is so powerful, Dr. Rachel. And as someone who just celebrated 6 years of building Symba this past week, I have so much admiration and respect for building something to 21 years. It's incredibly challenging, and the odds are sometimes stacked against us and really challenging, but I really respect the work that you're doing. This element of trust, I know we're going to dive deeper into it today, but it resonates with me so much. And I'm constantly learning how I build it, not only with our customers, but as we're building a team internally and how we design those experiences. Before we kick off our conversation into trust, I'd love to learn how the both of you met, because my co-founder and I, we met at a Women in Tech event, and we're best friends, thought leaders. We push each other, and it's really been the greatest gift of Symba is having my co-founder. Nichole, can you share a little bit about how you two met and your collaboration together?
I love sharing this story, and it's so cool hearing how you and your co-founder have built upon that connection into something really powerful and meaningful. And that's precisely why I said, hey, you need to get Dr. Rachel on with her, because it's very similar. So I met Dr. Rachel at her conference. It was called the Flourish Conference for Women in Leadership. And one of my colleagues, it was on the what you call the executive chat, and had participated for quite some time. And so she reached out and said, hey, Nichole, really want to participate in this conference. You got to go. Like, you really need to do it. This is something company needs to support. And I'm like, how many conferences I have to go to in this job? Like, another women's conference? What's so special about this one? No, this one's special. Like, it's not like the rest of them. It's real. You walk away with real stuff, and it's just, you just got to go. You just got to go. You'll see it for yourself. I say, okay, I go. And so I get there, and even in that morning, get myself together but I prayed and kind of got grounded on it, like just bring a positive attitude to it, that there's going to be there's always something, just keep an open mind. And so as I'm walking into the conference, there's this beautiful woman standing right at the door. Well, she's looking at me like, hey. And so she literally says that, like, hey. And I know her, but hey, right back at you. And so it's just kind of like this instant appreciation, like, oh, I see you too. Like, your whole fit is fly. And she's like, look at you, you looking fly too, kind of thing. And so I'm assuming that I'm going to see her come in and sit down at the event at some point. And then as it starts, she walks right up to the front and starts speaking and introduces herself as Dr. Rachel. And this was my vision. And I'm like, oh, so this is your show. Okay, got it. And I wasn't able to stay for the full day, but I was so moved and so like deeply touched by what she had to share. And even in the executive chat portion where I participated and kind of shared my story, and even the women there just appreciated hearing the journey. But then I got to come back and get fed as well. I pulled Rachel to the side and I said, I don't care how we do it. I don't care how long it takes, but you are bringing this conference to Chicago, period. And she said, okay, got it. Yes, we are. Let's do it. And I often think about the power of listening and being in agreement with people. I just said, we're going to bring this conference to Chicago. But she believed me and reached back out. We brought together our networks, and sure enough, we made the Chicago Flourish Conference happen, and it was amazing. But it really just started from two people who didn't know each other, me being inspired by the incredible work that she was doing, and then her believing me when I said, hey, we're bringing this thing to Chicago. And from there, it has started what's now, 8-year friendship, sisterhood, family, co-collaboration. And it's been a great experience. And I know it's just only going to continue to get greater.
That's so powerful.
And it really is. Every time, and I always let Nichole tell the story because I was just in the moment. You know what I mean? I just appreciated everything about her spirit when I saw her. And that's why it's like, hey, I mean, I remember like that moment. I was like, just fabulous from head to toe, inside and out. And the interesting thing, Ava, and we won't spend a whole bunch of time with this, but Nichole missed like the most powerful piece of Flourish. So I had this idea, and I'll keep this really brief, but I had this idea that there are so many women's conferences, so many amazing women's conferences, so much work being done on behalf of women and those who identify as women in the space. So I felt like there was this integration that was missing. Where can we feel like we have just had lunch with the Dalai Lama and Oprah and have that kind of spiritual awakening and feeling, but also leave with tangible, scientific, practical knowledge and tools that we can take with us. So many conferences we go to and we leave with this wonderful feeling, but without the tools, right? And so I wanted to create the tools. You know what I mean? The thing you take with you, with your name on it, right? So we created these workbooks with the person's name on it, and them designing their personal and professional life with the 6 dimensions of flourishing. Nichole missed that part. She didn't even go to that part. she
I still have my workbook though. You know,
right?
I got my book.
Remember I asked you about that. I was like,
I still have my original workbook.
Oh my God, so beautiful. So and you said something so powerful, which again, I'm just so appreciative that we're doing this work around belonging, because the pieces that we bring out, right? You said she believed in me, the belief in potential. I sent you that speech, right? The belief in potential. That I don't think anybody's talking about that, but it's so necessary, especially in this moment where we are. Just believing you and you believing in me created this incredible thing with 250 people times 2 or 3, however many times we did it in Chicago. We stopped doing Flourish because of COVID, but it started with that, right? It started with that, just the belief in each other. And we built something really amazing. And everywhere I go, people are asking me to bring the conference back. Yeah, just from that belief.
That's amazing. I'm like, you bring it back so I can go to this conference. And I do really, I feel like what you're saying hits home so much for me, because as a startup, you're kind of in this position where you're really asking people to believe, and almost like sometimes begging, but you're really like, give me a chance. And it's once they give you a chance, then you have to do everything you can to build trust. And for me, I think of it, it's like pilot is giving me a chance, and then I have to deliver and build trust. So Dr. Rachel, can you share a little bit about how you define trust? And so we can dig a bit deeper into that today.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, this is one of my favorite things. I'm considered one of the top 5 experts, thank you, Nichole Barnes-Marshall, in the world as a practitioner around this area of trust. And again, it's so necessary. So let's first start with the definition of trust. There are a lot of definitions out there, but I love this one because it's simple. Trust is the willingness to be vulnerable. Trust is the willingness to be vulnerable. So I trust Nichole with my life, with my money, with my house, with everything. But that vulnerability also opens me up to pain, right? It opens you up to be hurt. And that's the key, the willingness to be vulnerable. And so that vulnerability, although it may be small or large or obviously fluctuate with whatever you're going through, whatever that person is going through, and with externalities, it is that willingness to be vulnerable that is a very powerful tool. Just ask Brené Brown, right? And so the tool of vulnerability is really at the core of trust. Now, why does it matter so much, and how can we use it as leaders? And when I say leaders, I mean leaders of everything, whether that be your household, whether you're a janitor and you're the leader of keeping the building clean, whether you're the leader of one of the top tech companies like Bill, whether no matter who you are a leader of something. And so as leaders, we need to be trustworthy, Ava, and that's what you're talking about, right? And so trustworthiness is delineated into 3 pieces, 3 parts. And I shared this story yesterday. You'll probably get a chuckle out of it. And these are in no particular order. It really is about primacy, what is most important to you and or your organization at the moment. But I try to build trust across all 3 all the time, right? So the first, again, in no particular order, is benevolence, right? Benevolence, when I think of benevolence, I think of my grandmother who had 19 children. And my mom is one of them. She only went to the 8th grade. She married a sharecropper. They had all of these Black children in deep South Arkansas, Gould, Arkansas. And if there wasn't a Google, you wouldn't even be able to find it. And she built a life for them. Out of 19 children, 11 of them are attorneys, right? She gave her life for us. She loved us without exception, loved us inside and out every moment of every day. And until she passed away at 16, and she loves me right now. She's always with me. So benevolence is this idea that you put the needs of others before yourself, or at least equal with yourself, right? That you are a kind person, that you're a good person, that you're an empathetic person. That's benevolence, right? And so ensuring that you show benevolence authentically, and that's a whole nother podcast, Ava, authentically show benevolence. That's one dimension of trust. And as I mentioned, I think about trust, I think about my grandmother, and I would trust her with my life, but I would not trust her to do my taxes, right? Yes. So as much as I trust her, as benevolent as she is, she only went to the 8th grade. So she does not have the second dimension of trustworthiness, which is competence, right? Do you have the experience, the expertise, the education to do the job that is set in front of you? So when I had thyroid cancer, I had to find the most competent doctor that I trusted with his competence to open my throat, remove my thyroid, and make sure that I was okay. I wanted him to be benevolent, but that wasn't my major concern. My major concern is, are you competent to do this job? So the third dimension of trustworthiness, and this is important, is integrity. Now, when I say integrity, you're going to think high moral standards, because that's who you are, Ava, and that's who you are, Nichole. You have high moral standards, but it is not about high moral standards. It is about shared values. And so this is an example that I use. You remember The Sopranos? If Tony Soprano asked Pussy to go out and break someone's legs, he would do it. Not because they have high moral standards, but because they have shared values. He trusted with his life that Pussy would do that. And that's because they had shared values. So integrity is about finding those shared values with an individual. Not all of them will be shared. You're two different people, right? But finding those shared values and building on those. That's being trustworthy. That's being trustworthy. And so how does that help leaders? Why does that matter so much today? If we had 10% more trust in the world, we'd have fewer wars, we'd have a better economy, we'd have more educated people across the globe. You know what I mean? Just with 10% more benevolence, more competence, and more shared values, more people looking for those shared values. And so that's what we help organizations and leaders to build. And that's enabled by psychological safety. Trust is the currency with which every relationship is built. Psychological safety is the enabler. So I hope that wasn't too long a definition, but I hope it gives you a sense. I spoke about this yesterday and everyone came up to me and they were like, oh my God, I have to go back and rethink my whole life now. You know, right? And I have to go back and I love that, right? And I have to go back and think about how I'm behaving and how am I experienced as a trustworthy leader.
It's so important when we reflect and when we receive information that is meaningful and challenge us to think, that we go back and reflect. And so I think that's the biggest compliment really anyone can give someone, is that they are rethinking things after you share your thoughts and the dialogue. And it's interesting you said that notion about integrity, because it actually, whenever I think of trust, I always think about trust being positive. But trust doesn't necessarily mean that you're always driving positive actions, right? Mm-hmm. Trust means that you could have trust in very nefarious organizations and that they are built off of trust, right? Think of like cartel and other formations and other organizations that are doing things that it's just very fascinating as I think of system design.
And they're absolutely built on trust. The cartel is built on trust, shared values. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when someone came up to me yesterday, and she's the woman who actually from IBM. She said, just have to rethink my whole life. And she said, I've always thought of trust, to your point, as positive. And now I have to rethink. And again, you can trust someone's benevolence, but not their competence, right? You can trust their shared values, but not their benevolence or competence, right? And so really trying to peel back the onion on it. And the bottom line is that you can't control anyone else. So how can you be more trustworthy in your actions, in your thoughts, in your behaviors, in your policy exploration, in everything that you do?
Yes. And it's really important when I think about trust in this environment. It's easy to trust those who might look like us. And sometimes if we have communities of trust that are not bridging through others, I think that's when maybe you can have somewhat of a disconnect. And Nichole, I really feel like you have a really strong pulse of all the different industries that you've worked on. How do you build this internally? How does this manifest? How do we start to actually implement trust in the workplace? Can you speak to some of the work and the initiatives that you've been leading?
Yeah, and it is no easy feat, because in every organization, people bring with them all of their kind of baggage and perspectives and expectations around what the company should be doing as it relates to, and also how they reconcile it with the reality of what it takes to run a profitable, sustainable organization. And so for me, the way I've approached this is really through kind of three main pillars, which is talent, culture, and business. And so from a talent perspective, we look at DEI, and that's kind of not just at Pinterest, but really the philosophy I've taken with, I think, all of the companies I've worked for, is first and foremost, there has to be that representation. There has to be that representative mix. And not only just beginning and ending at the recruiting stage, but throughout the entire life cycle. So where you're sourcing talent, and then what's the onboarding process? And then once they're there, how do you manage for performance or talent review and succession and leadership development, even all the way through to total rewards? The full talent experience has to have diversity, equity, and inclusion fully embedded throughout. And then on the culture side, every organization has a culture, whether it's the culture that you have been intentional about curating or the one you end up having without, because of the lack of the intention behind it. And so I've always tried to take efforts to be intentional about shaping an inclusive culture. And that happens through learning and development. That happens through external partnerships, communications, making sure that we're not only talking and focusing on when there's a crisis happening externally, but how is it showing and cutting through every aspect of our communication? Who's telling the message? What message are we delivering? How are we leading with inclusion at the forefront? So those are the kind of culture, and as well as an important part, employee resource groups. They're critical to culture shaping, because that's the employee voice helping to shape and create that culture. And whether we're talking about appreciating intersectionality or activating allyship or even celebrating identity and being able to really, through that, bring a level of authenticity for individuals and collective groups represented within the organization to be able to bring their authentic selves into the company. All of that helps to shape culture. And then finally, from a bottom line perspective, when you're working at a business for a for-profit organization, you have to be able to deliver on the bottom line. And often DEI is seen as a distraction from it rather than the access to a more productive, a more robust bottom line. So from a business perspective, we really seek to integrate DEI, whether it's through the business processes. So if it's at Pinterest, when we think about the development of our different products that show up on the platform, how we do that with an inclusive lens is critical. Or whether it's through the suppliers that we work with and ensuring that we have an array of diverse suppliers that help us deliver in our business and perform well. And then also partnerships shows up there too. But being able to, or going back to processes, I'm thinking also of our design and marketing processes. So when you think about what images show up, if you're in advertising or whatever industry that you're in, obviously with us being in technology and being a visual platform, images are everything. So we've taken the stance that we're going to be, and we are, diverse by default. So no matter what you search for on our platform, you're going to be able to see a wide range of images that reflect that thing that you're searching for. So if you're searching for a dress, you're not only going to get white women, blonde hair, size 0 to 4 in that dress. You're going to see a full range of women in that item, size, color, hair pattern, all of the different things. So those I think are critical. And from a Pinterest perspective, it's been so valuable for us to really lean into inclusion as a forethought, as a key strategy, because that's our differentiator. That's what sets us apart from all the rest of the noise kind of out there from a technology and a platform perspective. You don't get this unique and uniquely inclusive experience where everyone who comes on the platform has the opportunity to see themselves and be themselves. So it's my belief that when you do all of that well, then belonging is the output. That's the result of having had the opportunity to be valued, seen, heard, contributed, co-creating, and all of that leading to sustainable growth and even more innovation and possibility. So as we continue to do this, we're going to learn and create new things because we were able to bring this inclusive lens throughout the full life cycle.
Absolutely. And both internally and externally. I really love that you talked about just the design of the product and the application. We just released our episode with Mason, who leads diversity and inclusion at Mattel, and he was talking about the dolls and the games and how they invite the individuals from that community at the very beginning before anything's even created. And it's so important. I'm planning a Persian wedding and I'm using Pinterest, and there are Persian pictures of brides, and they have all of the activities. And I did see when I would look up that in other platforms, the wrong representation was coming up. And so I think as an end user using your platform quite regularly right now, I see that, and it's amazing to see it in action. Do you have any advice for leaders in this moment right now? You talked about bottom line. I feel like we're 3 years out almost from George Floyd, and I feel like there's been, unfortunately, in tech, not as much allocation of resources as we saw. So any guidance that you might have for leaders in your shoes right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen this shift happen as well. And it's, on one hand, really disheartening to see that for some organizations, all of the commitments made in 2020 were good to make because of what was happening in the world at that time. And then as the economy started to struggle, certain industries started to really struggle, and tech being one of them, advertising sectors another, and tech is heavily driven by advertising. That's where you started to see businesses really retreat and fall back, like, oh, our bottom line is being hit. We need to save money, so we're not doing much on DEI now. Let's slash the team in half, or let's eliminate it altogether. Or these legislators are making all of this noise about that's anti-DEI. We saw what happened to Bud Light. We don't want any of that smoke. So let's just kind of pull back on this DEI strategy or initiative, or let's just keep it more quiet. And I think organizations who do that to their own peril, they ultimately will not be able to survive from a sustainability perspective. One, primarily because we know Gen Y, Z, and Alpha, and Z and Alpha in particular, are the most diverse generational cohorts and lead with DEI as a value in making decisions, hiring decisions, where they choose to work, what items they choose to buy. So companies who are fearful about these negative headwinds that are coming will ultimately, I think, will be contributing or accelerating their own demise, because they're not really getting the full value and the full need and expectation that the workforce and the customer base and the marketplace is expecting. As well as, and this is the other one that really gets me, many companies spoke about this work in 2020 as aligning with their values. And so now you're making decisions that are not driven by the values, they're driven by the bottom line. And so when you're willing to capitulate on your values to ensure that you maintain your bottom line, then that really says what you value. It speaks very clearly about what's important. And so if any business that needs it to sustain itself will obviously need to drive revenue. But there are ways to do that are again rooted in values, rooted in the ability to see and appreciate the uniqueness that every person within the organization, every customer, every shareholder brings into the mix, and to disinvest from that, I think ultimately speaks to the short-term nature in which they're viewing their business. So, and I also think we need leaders, particularly in DEI, who understand this work and can articulate this value very clearly to their business leaders so that they can be influenced to make the right decisions, as opposed to their capitulation and fear, like, oh my gosh, they're coming for us. Let's see how we can cut, and let's make this, not put so much emphasis on this programming. No, this is the time for DEI leaders to step all the way up into their own power and into their own expertise as business leaders, and use the lens through which we bring that will help to contribute and add to the business, rather than falling in line with the perception that DEI is a distraction from the business. It only amplifies. When done well, it only amplifies, it only elevates. And that's what we need real DEI leaders to be stepping into that role and advising their peers on how to use this as an asset and an amplifier for the business.
Obviously we're just, I'm damn near standing up, giving you a standing ovation, right? And
same here.
I'm never get on a roll.
I'm like, let's go.
I mean, it's just so, it's so powerful. Which, and I know, Ava, you didn't ask me a question, but I just have to step in and say a couple of things. Number one, +1 to every single word that Nichole just spoke. Every single word that she just spoke. And that makes particularly poignant our book on global belonging, right? Because everything that she mentioned is really about being able to articulate across the globe. And diversity and equity, inclusion, and belonging looks very different in the United States than it does in every other country. And it will change. Just look at the Middle East right now. Right. And so this is not a destination, it is a journey. And the ability to, I have to give a shout out to our fearless leader, John Powell, who is the father of belonging, his notion of targeted universalism. And what Nichole is talking about, is trust, right? She's talking about DEI leaders being trusted by their executives, as you are, Nichole, to walk in and give him guidance on this topic. And he trusts you, right? And so therefore you have such a symbiotic and recursive relationship that it works because he trusts you so explicitly, you trust him so explicitly. We work with companies, as Nichole knows well, Amazon, AWS, Toyota, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And really it is about helping the leaders to understand that you do need to elevate this culture of belonging, and you need to target each individual, thinking about what, as Nichole so beautifully put it, what each individual brings to the mix, right? And so that piece, as we explore that across the globe for leaders, is just really critical. So I'm so excited to dig in and continue our research on global belonging, because I think it's so necessary at this moment.
Couldn't agree more with you. When I participated in the John Lewis Fellowship, they brought together fellows from around the world, and I represented the United States. So it was fascinating to learn about exactly what you're talking about, different relationships, how D&I unfolds and it's experienced everywhere else in the world, and share that knowledge and insight. So we cannot wait to read your book and the work that you're doing. As our final question, we always ask each leader, how do we open up the workforce? That's our mission, to drive equitable access to the workplace and equitable access to wealth creation. Nichole, would you share your insights first, and then we'll pass it over to you, Dr. Rachel?
Sure. Well, I feel like my answer would be obvious. To open up the workforce, it requires us to be open to the entire workforce and have workplaces that are prepared and focusing on creating inclusive cultures, so that all of the diversity that's in the workforce has the opportunity to come in to our place of work and have an incredible career experience where they have access to so many growth and development opportunities. They have access to connect with others who have a shared identity, as well as the opportunity to connect with so many others that they have an opportunity to learn from and to grow from and to expand their perspectives and worldviews. And so the only way to get to that is, this is why I love the equation of D plus E plus I equals B. When you have the diverse workforce and with equitable processes and systems, with inclusive cultures, the outcome is belonging. And so this is why it's my life's work, and believe that's the way to open up the workforce.
I couldn't agree more. It's interesting that Nichole and I can speak so easily for each other, right? I'll take a little bit of a different, more tactical approach, right? So Nichole talked about in her earlier answer this notion of really how to use diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across the entire employee lifecycle, right? She talked about your sourcing, your recruiting, your onboarding, your talent management, and everything that happens within it, your advancement strategies, and I'll even add sort of exit interviews to that, right? The whole talent lifecycle, making sure that you are including diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across that lifecycle. So you talk about opening up the workforce, I would include reassessing job requirements, right? If we think about what the workforce looks like today, some of the people have the shared values. Some of them just look like the founder or look like whoever is making that decision, right? And so really opening up the job requirements, looking at recruitment channels. As Nichole said, where are you sourcing from? And how can you each day think about sourcing from new places that you hadn't thought about before? Implementing inclusive hiring practices. I think some companies are doing a decent job of that, but many companies are still struggling, as Nichole nods her head. Obviously, inclusive culture is important. Supporting career development, right, for across the board. ERGs are so important, as you mentioned, to that work. And again, there are 36 dimensions of diversity. Again, a whole nother podcast. But it's not just race, gender, and sexual identity. There's neurodiversity. There's sexual identification. There's socioeconomic status. How can we completely open up our mind and ensure that everyone has equal opportunity and equitable opportunities? Using data to drive decisions, right? Really looking at where we are now and where we'd like to be using qualitative and quantitative data. Thinking about work-life balance. We haven't talked about that, but our mental health is in the balance now, right? So when we talk about we're opening up the workforce, what does that look like from a work from home perspective, from a balanced work-life, quote unquote, balanced work-life perspective? Engaging the community, looking at your policies and procedures and norms, and looking at transparent reporting. And so just to get a little tactical, those are a few things that I think companies and leaders can do. At the end of the day, everything that we're talking about leads to both bottom line results. The companies that we work with are doing very well in the marketplace because this is part of their values and they stand in those values, as Nichole said earlier. And the only thing that I would add to this, and we will be talking about it in our book on global belonging, is individual responsibility. Every individual has the responsibility to speak up and speak out and let us all know what they need in order to feel that they belong, because every individual is different and every individual has the responsibility to open themselves up and ask themselves, what am I doing to ensure that my colleagues, my family, my friends feel seen, feel heard, and feel valued, and that their contribution is accepted and exceptional, and how can I help? So that's the only thing that I would add to everything that Nichole has so graciously shared today.
Thank you so much. This was so powerful and insightful. I only wish we had more time, and I think we already can build a whole suite of podcasts together, given so many powerful things that we talked about. I'm so excited for your book and grateful for the work that you're both leading. I feel like you're such a powerful duo to bring this conversation to light for everyone to learn from. So thank you for sharing your work and impact with us here at Symba. We're so grateful to have you on Open Up the Workforce.
Thank you so much, Ava. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing to open up the workforce. Be sure to call on Nichole and I when you celebrate your 7th year. We'll be celebrating with you. And all of the work that you're doing is so incredible. And Nichole, you already know this, but I will say it publicly every single opportunity I get. I thank God for you and the work that you're doing. It is changing lives every single day around the world. So thank you.
Right back at you, sis.
Thank you so much.
Bye.